Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology. We're two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie. I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello, how are you?
I am all right, and I am a feeling that we may be high on the BS scale today, but let's see how things go. How are you doing?
I refer the honourable member to the reply I gave some moments ago.
Excellent. Good to know. Good to know. Yeah, so we're talking about the word today, which is lovely. Let's get initial thoughts out of the way so that we can dive in and see what we think. So what do you think of it?
I think more of it than you do.
It's not hard.
Oh, come on, come on. It can't be that bad compared to some of the filler that's gone. Beatles for Sale, for example, or surely it's better than P.S. I Love You from the first album.
Okay, we'll return to that question if you want to. Yeah, I mean, to be upfront about this, I'm not particularly struck on this song. I don't think it's
What is
think
it
it's all that good.
what is it that grates with you then?
There's something a bit contrived about the whole thing. There's something about the way that it's constructed. I think it feels derivative musically, particularly of Drive My Car. It's using the same kind of D7th, G7th kind of driving chords in it. It's a late arrival in the album, obviously. So Drive My Car was done first. So it is the second of those two songs to be recorded, and it feels like it. And it's just there's very little variety in it. It's sort of verse, bridge, verse, bridge, verse, bridge. We're done. It's a bit plodding, and there are aspects to it that I like. I think Ringo's doing a great job. I think it is a really good vocal from Lennon, and we'll kind of get into the weeds as we go on. But overall, there's something. I don't know. I can see the scaffolding, and that's very rarely the case for Beatles songs. And certainly none of the ones that we've covered on this album up to that point. I think you can see the scaffolding, but you can kind of see it here a bit.
I think it's interesting you say that you find this plodding because when I was listening to it over and over and over again earlier, it struck me that it's a bit punchier and a bit pacier than Drive My Car, and that for all the energy there is in Drive My Car, actually tempo wise, it's relatively staid compared to a lot of Beatles songs. So I find there's a good sense of punch through this, and I suspect that very much then becomes a subjective judgment as to whether you like, for example, the piano that kind of runs underneath it, because that can be something that I think can put people off. I suspect the very introduction as well could be something that will either make you sit up and go, "Oh, that's a bit different," or "What was that?" And and I even get that sense from reading MacDonald as well. I get the feeling that he thinks that's a bit twee, that little introduction and the piano that I think McCartney is playing. But I like it. I think it sort of sets it up in a way that sort of says, okay, right, well, Drive My Car. If there are similarities there, I'll trust your judgment on it. The Drive My Car, right? So we're opening with the guitar on that, and that's the thing. Here we've got the piano, and that's going to be the thing that drives us through and underpins a lot of the song. I think it's pretty good. I'm not a big fan of the harmonies on this, but I really do like the verses where it is McCartney, and I think also to say it's just verse chorus. Okay, that's fine, but then that could also be a criticism for about 50% of the songs that we've spoken about as well. So there must be something in those verses and those choruses that isn't actually speaking to you.
I guess. I mean, I think with obviously you're right. There are plenty of songs which are just verse, chorus, but you usually get something else. You usually get like an instrumental break, or maybe yeah, like that little guitar riff at the beginning of Drive My Car. It doesn't come back. It's just the introduction, but it gives you kind of like a way into the track. I don't mind the piano in this. I'm certainly not put off by it, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just there's very little variation in it. Yeah, you get the harmonium that comes in that George Martin is playing, but it's not. It's just another little thing in it. It doesn't really feel like it's necessarily pushing the song into strange new places. It's just kind of, it's sort of there. And
So shall I then maybe kind of pick out some of the things that do appeal to me? I
yeah,
like the
absolutely.
contrast between the whatever you want to call it, the bridge, chorus, refrain,
Hmm.
where you've got the harmonies going on. So it start with that, and then the verse where it's Lennon who is singing about the word, and that's fine. We'll get onto the lyrics a little bit later. Let's not start with that. And I think Lennon's singing is pretty strong there. You can sort of feel that there is an emotive plea that he, wants us to believe in whatever it is that he's singing about. And also when you've got that verse, I think the guitar line that underpins it, that descending guitar line, that really appeals to me. It feels, quite high in the mix. It feels as though it's really developing its own sense of personality, and and that's good because again, I'm picking on two things here that I'm not always on top of. I'm not always a big fan of some of the guitar lines on these songs. Regular listeners will know that I have in the past been fairly critical about the nasality, if that's a word, of John Lennon's singing and some of the double tracking that they've done in order to mask his own insecurities. So I think that's a real positive, and I do like the piano. It gives it to, as far as I'm concerned, something a little bit different from a lot of what we've had on the album so far, where the sequencing in a couple of places has been a little bit iffy, like having, Norwegian Wood and Nowhere Man relatively close together. And was it Norwegian Wood and You Won't See Me as well? There was some of the harmonies on the that were similar there. So it does feel like, as far as I'm concerned, we're getting something different. I do think this song has the capacity to throw people out because of the notion of the word. But then I, when I first heard this, I don't think I was aware of the deeper meaning of the word being love, if indeed there is a deeper meaning to the word being love. It is suggested, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there's a religious connotation going on there, or that it is, the good book is like a direct Bible reference or something like that.
Yeah, but no, but also in terms of the whole, kind of peace and love,
Yeah, yeah.
that sort of development of a countercultural view of love as a notion, love is a concept, and all of that sort of thing. Sort of going forward about 5 years into Lennon's solo work. Um, so there's lots of bits in here that just kind of resonate with me. Even to the point where there are points where McCartney's doing some really good work on the bass as well.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with you. I don't like McCartney's bass line here, which is not
Okay,
a common thing for me to say, but there's something a bit smug about it. I don't I don't know if a bass line can be smug, but if it can, then it's this. It's especially the it's under the it's so fine, it's sunshine, it's the word love, and it goes dum 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 rum dum 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 rum da. Oh, fuck off! It really annoys me. I don't think that this is it's good enough in the verses, but under that stuff, I think it's not one of my preferred McCartney bass lines. I got to be honest.
okay. Well, that is just going to be a difference that we've got. We're not going to be able to resolve that because I mean, it's a subjective opinion, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, of course, absolutely.
Unless you're going to try and persuade me that objectively it's a bad bass line.
No, I think it is a very well played bass line, and it's clearly one that some effort has been being put into. It's not just a simple root note thing. It's not just going there is a proper counter melody there. Some of the work, yeah, during the verses is good. It's not an easy bass line to play either. So it's got a bit of heft to it, but there are just moments where I think like he's got maybe 60 or 70% of a good bass line here, and then it kind of flops, and it kind of it's a bit sort of pathetic. It kind of pulls a lot of the kind of strength of the previous work kind of out of it.
Can I just check your plosive there? Was that a B or a P?
It was a B.
It was a B. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Pathetic, not
Okay,
pathetic.
I was just checking. I mean,
No, that's fine. That is an important distinction.
yeah, yeah. I just want to make sure that listeners all around the world.
Yes.
Um,
Well, and I think the harmonies do the same. I find the harmonies in this very diluting. I think they pull away from a lot of the power. I think this would be a song which would benefit from a stronger, simpler melody. And we get that with kind of like in the beginning I misunderstood, like when Lennon is going full pelt, and it's great. But I think the song needs more than that. It's every time we cut back to the harmonies, I just kind of it sort of yeah, it kind of sucks a lot of the energy out of it, and it pulls a lot of what I think the song is trying to communicate out. And it's a bit I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit diluting. It reduces the power of the song rather than increasing it for me. They're technically accomplished. I don't want to say that they're bad in that sense, but I don't necessarily think they're working to the advantage of the material. I just want to make that very clear.
okay, Paul Ringo, you can rest easy.
Yeah, well done,
Yes,
boys.
yeah, well done. JG's on side. You can play. You're allowed to have an opinion. It's
That's
perfectly
that's
fine.
that's very kind of
Um,
you.
I mean,
Yeah,
lots of people would have not bought Rubber Soul or never even heard this song, don't know its exist, and some of them, when they listen to it, will just go meh
yeah.
and move on, and it's fine. But I think it does follow on quite nicely from Think for Yourself, in the sense that there is an element of of drive of funk, if you like. There is an attempt to really get things swinging before we then dive into a Michelle. So I think it's quite suitably positioned on the album. I think that as a pairing is pretty good. I think, yeah. I just wonder, have you always had this view of it, or was it something that you were aware of from listening to the album first through, or is it as it you've become a bit more of a muso that you've developed this view?
Firstly, I will strongly push back on the idea that I'm any kind of muso. Thank you very much, young sir. How dare you? But yeah, it's never really clicked for me, and I think part of the reason for that is, at least initially, when I was kind of, we've talked many times about this podcast about how you and I kind of got into the Beatles at the same stage, like how that very early discourse around the band and sort of the late 80s and up to sort of the mid 90s, more or less up until McDonald, was very kind of party line, very very sort of consensus. There wasn't a lot of space for different opinions, and one of the things, and obviously this is something that we need to touch on with this song, is this idea that it prefigures something like "All You Need Is Love," or like, yeah, that's like you mentioned, like the word as in the start of this like countercultural movement as well. And I have never really felt that about this song, and so from kind of initially reading about it, and I think I did read about it before I heard it, maybe not much before, but it would be around the time where I was just getting albums at random, in random sequences. Okay, well, this one's available in Oxfam, or oh, I've made a bit more money this week at my job, so I can afford to go to HMV and buy it. Whatever, however it came down. And I kind of resist that interpretation of this song a bit. So I've always held it at a slight difference, and I've been trying to be more analytical approaching it this time out, because obviously we're discussing it here rather than just falling back on my own preconceptions. But I'm still not finding a huge amount in it that I think is that great. It's not a disaster. It's not the worst song on the album, although it is the least listened song on the album as far as at least Spotify is concerned. Um, but I've never really got on with it all that well.
Well, I think I'm fairly confident in saying that I had no conception of what this song sounded like up until I first listened to the album, which probably would have been about 16 or 17 years old, something like that. And it would have been one that I'd have bought possibly after Revolver, as just another one to kind of fill in some of the gaps, but perhaps after Revolver, but before Beatles for Sale and things like that. Um, and so I think I just have a bit of an emotional reaction to it, and in the sense that it was not something I was aware of, and you know what it's like when you've listened to, or perhaps kids today don't, when you listen to an album. In fact, actually, scrub that altogether. Before the internet age, before you could go on Apple Music, iTunes, Spotify, whatever it is called, and listen to the songs before you ever bought anything. You'd stand in the record shop and you'd hold the CD or the tape box, or the sleeve in your hands, and you would just read the titles of the songs, and you try and work out what they would be like from the title. Well, I have no idea what the word would be about. I mean, if anything, that just sort of sounds like it could be a song for Sesame Street. Today's word is, here is the word. No idea. And it was before in the UK we had the disastrous, comical, and yet supposedly influential Friday night, late night TV program on the word. So again, just no idea. And okay, so at that point I was coming out of um a religious influence, so I would have been aware of that idea of the word, but I was pretty sure that the Beatles weren't a Christian band in that way, so pretty sure that it wasn't related to that. Don't think I'd read any biographies at that point, so I just had no idea what it sounded like. So then when that piano kicks in and you have that line driving through, and you have that descending guitar line, and you have the harmonies, and you've got Lennon's plaintive wail, it just sounded different from anything that I'd listened to before. And just as an example of that, I mean, so there we're talking about mid to late 80s, and I'd have the Beatles stuff to fall back on. I'd be aware of some of Lennon's solo catalogue. Happy Xmas, War is Over was everywhere every Christmas, for example. My dad's mum had a copy of Double Fantasy, and I was aware, and in even before Lennon died, and so I was aware of some of those songs, and Imagine was still a kind of like a big thing. Even before he died, it was still a reasonably well known song. This sounds like none of that. And in fact, some of the bigger songs on Double Fantasy came up when I was on an Apple Music listening session this morning. It would just sort of randomly kind of crop up on the feed, and you just think, beautiful boy, isn't it interesting? We've got the word is love, and we've got oh, I'll hold your hand to help you cross the road, which is effectively what Beautiful Boy from Double Fantasy is about. And you just think, what's happened to this person? So the word, to me, it was just like, it wasn't like anything else. Now, when I say it wasn't like anything else, what I don't mean is, oh man, that's so radical. It is so unlike anything else. I just hadn't heard anything with that kind of drive and power and punch before. So my emotional reaction to it is generally a positive one.
Okay, fair enough. Small sidebar. Beautiful Boy is a really great song. Really, really like it. I don't like everything in Double Fantasy, but Beautiful Boy is a really great song. I don't know why that was necessary to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Yeah, I don't care. You can make all the rude gestures you like. I standing by that opinion.
It's the sound. It's this to me. It's the sound of someone. I think it's the epitome of the kind of songs that people write when they're happy, and also an indication that people should stop writing songs when they're happy, because generally they're twee and nonsensical.
Well, you see, that's how I feel about Woman, which I think is a terrible song.
Yeah, well, no, that's true. That came up about 20 minutes later, and
Right. Okay, back to the subject at hand. I mean, yeah, I mean, how you emotionally react to a song is inevitably going to inform how you react to it in a critical sense as well. And I mean, the wider sort of cultural, what's the right word for this? The wider cultural
footprint,
diet
baggage.
dialogue, I
diaspora.
was going to say, what dialogue around Lennon is always going to be, the cliched, peace and love, and that's inescapable. That's set in stone now, and that's fine. Even although on this album alone, we will find that is very much not his only reaction to the world around him, shall we say? So it's interesting from a sort of sociological standpoint that this is where a lot of that starts to become explicit. It in a way, I think that tends to mean the song gets a little oversignified, though, in terms of its overall importance. Everything has to start somewhere. Fair enough, of course. This is where that kind of grander approach or larger perspective that Lennon is leaning into, that this is where it first gains that first expression. Yeah, I mean, as far as the lyrics are concerned, it's a bit self-righteous in places, and that also slightly turns me off it a little bit. I'm here to show everybody the light. Well, thanks, mate. That's really nice of you. How considerate. How generous. Thanks. That's would have been impossible otherwise. And there's just little moments sort of dashed through it like that, which are just. I think a song like, I mean, it's inevitable. I'm going to say "All You Need Is Love" now, but just handles better. And okay, of course, it's a few years later. He's had more experience. He's had more opportunity to kind of develop this. Even though when we talk about "All You Need Is Love," I'll have plenty to say about the lyric there as well. But it's just, it's the start of something, and yeah, I think that tends to mean it's a little oversignified.
Okay, so I've been thinking about "All You Need Is Love" quite a bit recently, for reasons. I can't think why actually. It's just sort of been cropping up because I've come to the conclusion that it is an enormously, and I don't say this about many Beatles songs, enormously overrated song. It is bland. It's dull. Oh, I'm just trying to sort of chuck in Dishwater here, but and I think it's a compromise song. I think it's a song written in a hurry, and a song where the message comes through despite everything else. Um, so it is interesting because I mean you're far from the only person to have made the connection. I was looking at an article from the highly spirited Far Out magazine that is desperately trying to draw a line from "She Loves You" through to "All You Need Is Love" via the word, because we're talking about love as a concept
Mm.
for the first time. And and I think maybe I like the fact he's having a go at writing about the word love in a different way. And we kind of been crying out for them to do something a bit different lyrically. On the one hand, there's a case of the words don't really matter as long as the emotion fits the song. On the other hand, it's okay. Well, it's another way of writing about, man likes girl, girl doesn't like man. No, let me rephrase that. Man likes woman, woman doesn't like man. Man gets all sad, or man likes woman, woman no longer likes man because woman now likes another man. Man gets a bit sad, or man likes woman, woman likes man. Temporarily, they're a bit happy. There's lots of different versions of that. So here it's about an idea, that actually love, however you want to define it, is generally a good thing, and if we can get people to love each other, then that's great. Yes, we can quibble with the odd line that basically says, "Hey, it's down to me to get you to love each other." Okay, that's fine. John Lennon wasn't exactly short of pushing his ego states, but it's a couple of lines in amongst the bigger whole. I'll forgive him that because he is genuinely trying to do something different. um, how intentional it all is, and whether it is tapping into the development of that countercultural movement in America, predominantly stereotyped as being, West Coast California. I don't know, because it is, as we've hinted earlier, on the same album as Run for Your Life. So which Lennon are we to believe is the dominant one in terms of their views on love? Is it that possessive love, or is it that sort of, all giving, free spirited, universal love? And that's where it gets hard to sort of to draw too much inference from the lyrics, and which is why I think sometimes saying it goes from here to here via here as an absolute is slightly problematic. But it's fine. I mean, you can say he picks this up again in God, for example, or he picks it up again in Imagine, and that's fine. But he kind of drifts in and out of this sort of thing. We also then get the instant karma side of it as well. So there's variety and there's inconsistency, which I think is genuinely interesting, because what it leads us to is a much greater sense of humanity and conflict in Lennon than you get in McCartney, which is not really something I'd normally say.
I think that's a very interesting point. Certainly, you know, I agree that trying to draw a straight line between something like "She loves you," this, and "All you need is love" is problematic, not least because it's reductive. Anybody is more than one thing, and that's more or less exactly what you just said.
Well, Far Out Magazine's all about content, isn't it? It's clicks, clicks, clicks.
Well, absolutely. But
Because can I apologies for jumping in? It says the John Lennon song that changed the Beatles forever. Quote, the underlying theme of the universe. This was written in February of this year, and you just think, really, Jack Watley, really? Or is it your sub? Well, do they have sub editors? I don't know. Maybe the writers write their own. Maybe they get AI to write the titles. But yeah, really, Jack. Apologies for jumping in.
That's all right. It does seem a bit clickbaity. But yeah, it's just that it's just that you clicked, so it worked. It's just that thing that you can't. People are more than one thing. People are conflicted. People can hold contradictory ideas in their heads at the same time. You can believe that the word is love, and you can believe that you better, well, I'm not going to quote "Run for Your Life," but you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
It's those things aren't. Cognitive dissonance is a thing that people have, and it's fine. Not everything needs to be reduced to a straight line, and I dislike narratives that try and do that. I think that's kind of what I was hinting at earlier when I was saying the song was a bit oversignified, because it's often seen as being that, oh well, here's the journey, or here's where the journey begins, or whatever, and that just feels far too simplistic on an album which contains "Run for Your Life." But I mean, it's not the only one. Lennon is writing about quite a wide variety of subjects in this. We weren't particularly kind to Nowhere Man, but it's meaningfully a very different subject matter from The Word, or from In My Life, or for Run for Your Life. Like there's a lot of variety in what Lennon is trying in this album, and I think that bears mentioning as well, because as well as it being a song which is signified as the start of the great journey, but put it in context of the album, you think, well, actually he's trying a bunch of different stuff here and seeing what works. Some of this will be carried forward, some of it won't. We'll never have lyrics as dreadful as "Run for Your Life" again, from now until we start talking about Now and
Piggies.
Then. Well, yeah, but Lennon didn't write that.
No, I know, but it's just the one that popped into my head straight away there.
Fair enough. All right, allow me to rephrase that sentence. Lennon won't present us with a lyric as bad as "Run for Your Life." Even Bungalow Bill's better than that. But anyway, that's that. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, the thing is, he's just trying out a bunch of stuff, and I think that's one of Rubber Soul's great strengths is the variety of material in it, not just from Lennon, but it's one of the things that he's trying. It happens that this is one that stuck, but you can see that he's experimenting, that he's stretching his writing, he's stretching his musical ability, and he's stretching the way that he looks at the world. All that is very valuable, and The Word is part of that. And I don't want to diminish the song for that, even although it's not a song I'm particularly struck on. It's still valuable for seeing what he can do.
Yeah, and both Lennon and McCartney in interviews did make a point of saying that this was perhaps one of their more marijuana induced affected sessions as well, so that may have allowed that notion of, the word and the word being love and that kind of universality, rather than it being a deliberate attempt to change the world. Um,
I think that's much closer to the truth.
yeah, yeah. Mark Lewison says that it said the lyric is a prototype of All You Need Is Love, 2 years ahead of that world anthem. I think prototype is an interesting way of putting it, although I'm just trying to work out if in my mind a prototype is always going to be something that is improved upon by what you might say is the finished product. But then I
Definitely
suppose
not.
there are a lot of prototypes that will be better, because I suppose the finished product could then effectively be a compromise, which all you need is love. Certainly better to say it's a prototype of all you need is love than to say that all you need is love is a sequel of the word.
Nice setup. Thank you very much. Yes, I would certainly say that is a valid observation.
Because then you could look at it in a sense that, well, was Four Weddings and a Funeral a prototype for Notting Hill? Notting Hill is definitely not a sequel of Four
Having seen
Weddings and a Funeral.
having seen neither of those films, I'm unable to offer any
But they're about
valid.
love, man. They're about love. They're about the
Well,
word.
that's fair enough. Yeah, good. Okay, fine. I can't think of a good example of something to come back on.
No, that's
Um,
fine. There's a lot of there's not a massive amount around that's written about this, but I was intrigued when going through the Wikipedia page, as you sometimes do as a starting point,
yeah.
where it says in 2018 the music staff of Time Out London ranked the word, and don't jump in too soon here, at number 33 on their list of the best Beatles songs, except for the fact that it's not true. It doesn't actually appear anywhere on the list of the 50 best Beatles songs, unless they've written another one in clickbaity style since 2018. Because I mean, the list is just shit anyway. Because I mean, for a start, it's got Norwegian Wood in the teens.
Oh, yeah. No, that's
Yeah,
not right.
number 13, Norwegian Wood. Number 14, Sexy Sadie. Number 15, I Feel Fine. Now
Right.
let's unpick that trio for a second. I really like Sexy Sadie, but it feels a bit too much like an affectation. No, number 33 on this is Hey Bulldog, and the fact that Hey Bulldog appears in a top 50 list of Beatles songs is really that's someone desperately trying to be arch, and to basically, oh, look at me, look at how clever I am. A bit like all those people that think that Rain is like the best thing ever.
Okay, good opinions coming up. Quite recently, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the podcast before, so I apologize to both you and listeners if I'm repeating myself. But not that long ago, as in like a few weeks ago, I did one of those kind of things you can find online where you like input a set of data and vote for a bunch of stuff, and it sort of orders your stuff in that way. So basically, like my Beatles songs from number one to number whatever it is, 200 and whatever, ranked in order of my preference. It was a really fascinating 214. It was a really fascinating thing to kind of go through and find out what the results are. For what it's worth, my number 33 was For No One. Which I'm
Okay.
quite comfortable with. I think that's a fair ranking for No One. Some of them came out way higher than I expected. Some of them came out way lower than I expected. So I've kind of then adjusted the data to match what I actually think rather than just what the results, strictly speaking, of this kind of thing was. But it was a really interesting way to kind of look at your material or look at the material that you're interested in and uh get a handle on it, because especially when you're like it's easy to go like my favorite song is and the one I hate the most is but all that kind of stuff that lands sort of in the middle, it's kind of interesting to have it put in some sort of structure and have it organized in some way.
And
And
how is it calculating this?
so basically what happens is you input whatever it is, so in this case it's every song by the Beatles, and it then says it takes you through a number of votes where do you prefer
Right.
this song or that song? Do
Okay.
you prefer this song or that song? And I think it's like 900 options for the Beatles,
So you
roughly.
okay, right.
and you click on it, and you just go through all the options, and then at the end it generates a list. So number one is bleh, and number 214 is bleh. Number 214, for those that are interested, it was Matchbox. Fair
Okay.
enough. And so it's just an interesting way of kind of ranking all your stuff. And then I put a playlist together in Spotify, and so I have it all. And so it's kind of quite interesting to listen to it in that order rather than just kind of like a normal playlist or just the albums. And yeah, so that's where it
Okay.
ended up.
So it's kind of like one of those careers quizzes you do at school.
Yeah, but
Do
considerably
you
more
like working
interesting.
outside?
Yeah, exactly. Do you
Do
like
you
why
do
don't you
good
do it in the
children? Are you
road
good with
more or
children?
less than piggies?
No, I was just wondering if it was kind of like an AI thing, whether they were basing it on songs that you'd listened to, searches that you'd done.
No, it's not
Um,
that at all. It's 100% your input.
okay,
There's no AI, there's no data generation behind it, other than it will pull all the data that you have and then give you
okay,
options based on that. I don't know exactly what the algorithm behind it is, but
yeah,
it's not just do you like Taxman more than Eleanor Rigby because they happen to be side by side on the album or whatever. So yeah, but and the vast majority of this came out I was pretty happy. Like I said, I nudged a few things up and down the list where I thought, oh no, that's clearly bollocks. But for the most part, it was pretty good. For the record, the word came out at 169.
wow, okay. Do you remember what it was sandwiched between?
It is. I'm looking at the results now. It's sandwiched between If I Fail and Dr. Robert.
Okay, well, I think this. For, I really like If I Fell, but I really like Dr. Robert. So from my perspective, that's just an indication of how hard it is to actually rank and how pointless our own ranking system is, especially if you're doing out of 10. Yeah, well, anyway, um, because I would say that putting it alongside those two songs is an indication that actually it's a really good song because those other two are really good songs. Um, so the fact that you've got 168, 169, and 170, I think is more a reflection on you.
Yeah, I don't think much of Dr. Robert. I think it's probably the
Oh
weakest song on
man.
Revolver. Yeah, well, it's also the weakest
Oh
song on
man.
Revolver. So there's that. But
Oh man.
I know, we're gonna have so many disagreements coming up.
Well, we're not because it's going to be a case of saying, well, it's not as good as "And Your Bird Can Sing." Oh, well, okay, right, fair enough. You know, how much better is "And Your Bird Can Sing" than Dr. Robert? Well, I think it's like 50% better. I only think it's 20% better. Oh, okay. You know, it's going to be one of those. It's not as though it's going to be this is Mr. Moonlight all over again.
Well, that's thank God for that.
213? Was that 213?
Oh, hang on, I just closed my spreadsheet. Hang on, let me open
Oh,
it again, and I'll tell you where did Mr. Moonlight come out? It was 198. It is
wow.
squeezed between "Hold Me Tight" and "Little Child," which is probably something I could have phrased better. But yeah,
Okay,
so
right.
it's not rock bottom, but
That's
it's down there.
interesting.
It's down there with the likes of "Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby" and "I Go to Him," "A Taste of Honey." It's
I'm
that neck
I'm
of the woods.
I'm assuming just to sort of slightly bring it back to this that there's very little from this era of the Beatles apart from maybe what Ringo's going to serve us up at the start of side two. That's going to be down around the 190s and 200s. And in fact, I'd suggest that probably a lot of it is kind of pre 65.
Yeah, the majority of it is sort of relatively high. Where does I think "What Goes On" is quite low if I remember correctly. Let me double check. What goes on? Oh yeah, "What Goes On" is 174, so it's
Okay.
way down the list. But
Yeah.
everything else is just substantially higher.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay.
If
Because let's
anybody's
face
if
it.
anybody's interested in this list, I haven't published the spreadsheet, but if you do a search on Spotify, I'm there under JG McQuarrie, and the playlist that I've put together is called "It's All Too Much," and that's my 1 to 214 ranked Beatles songs.
Well, as we're up to about 40 minutes, and as we're talking about spreadsheets and we've been talking about rankings, it's probably a good time to say 7 out of 10.
Okay, well, it does seem like a good time to say 7 out of 10. Okay, I'm unsurprisingly going to go a bit lower. I think I'll give it.
If you say 6, I'm going to be really disappointed. If bearing in mind it's at 179 in your list, surely that's a 5 out of 10.
I was debating between 5 and 5.5 actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's gonna be. I think I'll just go for 5. I'll just go for a nice round number. I know you don't
You're
like.
mad.
Thank you very much. It's a little late in the day for that to come as any kind of revelation for you, but it's good to know that you've got there in the end. Any final points you want to make?
Nah.
We will leave it there for this episode. Thank you, anybody who's made it this far. You're very, very brave. You can really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We are on the sad and shoddy remains of Twitter at Beatles_ology. And we're Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, we will be talking about Michel. Et bien sûr, nous espérons que vous nous rejoindrez pour cela, mais en attendant, continuez à écouter.